Welcome to I Caught It on Audio. This is Ride or Die Episode 3, The Smashing Pumpkins.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of I Got It on Audio. Today we are going to be doing a Ride or Die episode featuring the band Smashing Pumpkins. If you haven't listened to our previous Ride or Die episodes, what we do is we go deep and thorough through all the through the whole catalog of a band. Basically, what we've done so far are bands from the 90s, when we were young and impressionable and learning about music, and we kind of have a discussion about their whole catalog and whether we think they should have kept going after the 90s, in the band's case anyway, or whether they kind of just should have hung it up and left it where they were. So I think for all three of us, we've got Dan, Zach, and myself on this one we don't have Jamie like we did in the last two. I think all three of us started our Smashing Pumpkins listening with the album Siamese Dream. And I want to say the first big song that I remember anyway was Today. Even though I don't think it was I think Cherub Rock was technically the first single, but Today is the first song I really remember listening to. And that great music video of them, it's the one with them driving around in the ice cream truck, right?
Yep,
right.
That's what I remember anyway. I haven't watched that video for 25 years, I don't think, but yeah.
Yeah, I just watched it again recently, as I was going through the playlist. I was like, I remember this video was really good. But yeah, so...
And you wanted to see Billy Corgan with hair.
Long hair Billy.
Yep.
James Iha in a dress.
Always. Darcy
looking sad.
Yeah.
They were just having a good time. It was the good time of the 90s.
Good time grunge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this album, man, it had Disarm, Today, Cherub Rock, and Rocket were all the singles, but there were a ton of good songs in this album. I honestly, I'm surprised that it, spoiler alert, didn't get any of our deep dives.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Other series.
I was like, why wasn't there a Smashing Pumpkins?
That's one of the ones. One of the bands.
Cut.
I was like, I should have done that right after I had put my list up. I was like, why didn't I do that? Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, easily could have done Mayonnaise or Space Boy or Silverfuck or
any of the other songs that weren't singles, basically. But
right, it's 13 great songs. It's not their strongest album, but gosh, it's a lot of fun. It's a great grunge pop album, alternative rock. I don't even know where you put it exactly. Maybe a little heavy metal. It's just got a little bit of everything in there.
I think it's
anything guitar early 90s.
Yeah, it's definitely
is in this album.
I would say it's definitely more related to metal while being alternative than it is to grunge, because I think Billy Corgan's approach is kind of the opposite of the grunge approach. I think he owes more to Boston than he does to the grunge influences.
The big arena rock.
His big influences, I think, are Kiss and Black Sabbath. So those definitely, like you can hear that in the more
sound,
metal approach. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is. This one came out right alongside albums like Nevermind and all that. Actually, Nevermind was a couple years earlier, but just it was great to hear this. Gosh, it would have been 8th grade for you and I, Dan. A couple grades earlier for Zach.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it as I think about this album when I think about freshman year, because that's probably when. Well, that's when, that is when Today was released, September 30th.
Okay, yep.
So that would have been, I remember that video right when I was deciding what music I liked, and I was honing in on the fact that I like music with guitars. And I think, you talk about all the great songs on the album. To me, Today and Disarm are, I like them for sentimental reasons, but to me, they're probably the two weakest songs on the album. But it's really more about the strength of the rest of the album than it is about like the weakness of Disarm or Today. This album is, I think there's an argument for this being the best Pumpkins album. It's certainly, to me, the most consistent song by song. There are no songs that you're like, take it or leave it. They're all great songs. So this one's right up there for me. But I love this album.
Yeah, since I'm a little bit younger than you guys, Today wasn't really the one that brought me in. I mean, of course, I heard it because it was everywhere, but because of it being everywhere, I kind of like was a little turned off with it. I mean, I recognized it as a good song, and I still love the song. But what really hit me hard was Disarm, because it was very different from the other stuff that was going on the radio. Like there was all this cookie cutter grunge rock going on, and this Disarm with the bells and the acoustic guitars and stuff. I'm just like, whoa, what is this? And I listened to that a lot. And I think that was what made me buy the album, actually. And of course, I listened to it straight through many, many times. And yeah, it is, it's high on the list of, I don't consider it my favorite, but it is definitely my second favorite.
Yeah. It's just a phenomenal album. No doubt about it. Good from track 1 all the way to track 13. So that was a great introduction to the Smashing Pumpkins. And then shortly after you got into that, they came out with their magnum opus, if you will, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, which is about 1,000 tracks long. It's a double CD, and just about every single track on this album is good, and some of them are amazing. This is the one that I would put as my favorite album of the Pumpkins. Like if I had to pick one album, I would pick Melancholy, just because there are so many good songs. I don't think it has my very favorite songs, but I could listen to 2 hours straight of Smashing Pumpkins and only have to skip the ones where James Iha is singing.
Correct answer. That is exactly right.
Conveniently, I think the last tracks on both albums, it's like exactly. Billy's just like, yeah, James, you can have one track. We'll throw it at the end.
Yeah, I mean, we're putting out 28 tracks on this album. I guess you can sing on 2 of them. So, even it's kind of the thing where every now and then there will be an Aerosmith track that has Joe Perry singing. It's like Joe Perry is perfectly fine as a vocalist, but you've got Steven Tyler, so why is Joe Perry singing?
Yeah.
And it's like that. And I'm not putting Billy Corgan on the same level as Steven Tyler, but man, he's a great vocalist. And why are you having James Iha sing when you've got Billy Corgan? That's really what that comes down to.
Yeah. And it's sad for poor James, because those are the only 2 songs that he has a writing credit on the whole album. But honestly, I don't particularly like his voice, and I think those songs are a little insipid. So I don't really make a point of listening to those. But you're right. I think the argument for this being the best Pumpkins albums for me is there's so much.
Exactly.
And there's such a wide variety of sounds. If Siamese Dream is like a perfect sort of like a perfect, what is it 12, 13 songs, 14? It's
13 tracks. Yeah.
So it's kind of like you can't, there's some variety. You can't complain about any of the songs, really. They're all fantastic, but they really amped up like the super heavy stuff on Melancholy. And then there's a lot of ballads. There's a lot of weird, like interesting sounds and like strange, approaches. And I think, if you have to choose one,
some pop songs too.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And if you have to choose one, I think you do choose the one that has more, minute by minute. Mm-hmm. Is it better? Well, it has moments that are better, moments that are worse. But there's just so much there. So if you have to choose one, you cheat and you choose the double album, I think.
Yeah. What do you think on the Melancholy, Zach?
Yeah, so this is the one that did it for me. I mean, of course, I listened to Siamese Dream a lot, but when this one came out, when the singles were coming out, I was like, oh yes, New Pumpkins, you know. And then when the double album came out, I bought it and I listened to it, and there was just something about it that really like hit home, you know, for all the different things that I was going through as an emotional teenager. The lyrics and the songs, and it really like it took me on a journey, and I often revisit that journey every time I go back and listen to it straight through. And so this one is the favorite of mine, just because, and like you guys said, you know, it has its ups and downs. It's not perfect. The James Iha songs are a little bit on the weak side,
Yep.
but it like overall the whole package just feels like complete, and there's just so much good to counter anything that's like the, you know, not so good.
Yeah, I mean, just the first single off this one, "Bullet with Butterfly Wings." You start off with just Billy shouting, "The world is a vampire." Then everybody comes in with their blaring guitars, you know, and it's just got this supersonic noise, you know. It's just so good. And then you've got other great singles like "Tonight Tonight," which is kind of lighter. 1979, just a fun messing around song. 0 and 33 are also. I'm surprised this only had 5 singles. That seems surprising, because I figured you could have gotten.
I think Muzzle was technically like a promo single, like it wasn't an official single, but it was like the last one that they sent to radio, and it got played a couple times on the radio.
I heard it on the radio. Out of the album cycle. It was definitely a radio song. But I mean, there's a limit to how many singles you put out because of time, you know. But like, they could have kept putting them out, because there's another like dozen songs that would have worked as singles. It's just there's that much going on. I
mean, obviously songs like "Porcelina" are not going to be, you know, your 13 or 10-minute long. It's not going to be a single, even though it's one of the best tracks on the album. XYU is a little long and awfully aggressive, but it might be my favorite song on the album. You know?
Not a good single, but I really like that. I really like XYU. I've always liked it, even with this like weird lyrics, which are a little hit or miss at times.
Right, like even the James Iha "Farewell and Good Night," it's kind of like a cathartic end to this giant project that they did. I mean, they must have spent so much time in the studio recording this thing. And I feel like maybe this was just because at least 3 people are singing on this one. I think Darcy,
I think they all sing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure
if,
even Jimmy.
You think
I think he does, because maybe on
the at least the 4-part. Like when they're singing together.
The times that they've played that song live, he comes out with a guitar and sings along as well.
Okay.
So it's very possible, but I don't know how they did it on the recording.
Like even that it's just this neat cathartic end to this big journey you went on for 2 hours straight. Yeah. It's just kind of them all being together, kind of doing their thing. It's a bit messy and convoluted, but it's kind of neat too, you know.
It's a neat concept. It's the stronger of the 2 Iha songs. And I think it has better melody, and it is a decent song. The problem is, for me, By Starlight's a perfect end to the album already. So sonically, so I don't really need the Farewell and Good Night. But you're right, it is pretty. That's the one where I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Take Me Down, I'm like, no, I don't need to listen to that.
I mean, the problem with Farewell and Good Night is it's the 27th best song on the album. You know,
exactly. That's exactly what it is.
What I think would have been better is to drop the "Take Me Down" from the first disc and then put "Farewell and Good Night" right there, because that, you know, the way that they, what is it, like "Dawn to Dusk" is the first disc, and then Twilight to Starlight. Yeah. So if you're go Farewell and your Good Night, then that would take you into the Twilight to Starlight, and then By Starlight, you know, that I feel like that would have made more sense. But
then whatever. You'd have to skip when you listen to it on CD in 1995, and you have to skip over Take Me Down instead of just hitting eject and tossing in Twilight to Starlight. So
yeah. Uh, yeah, so definitely their best album. I think we're all in agreement on that one.
Yeah. When I'm listening to Siamese Dream, I'm like, this is the best one. But I mean, practically speaking, I do think that there's more on Melancholy. So I think you got to go with it just because there's more good songs.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's a fair judgment that it's the best one.
So then, probably in 1996 or whatever, I realized, Siamese Dream was not their debut album. They had an album called Gish that didn't really get much radio play at all. I couldn't tell you what songs were on the radio, if anything. I'm being honest.
I never heard them on the radio.
No, I don't remember them being on the radio.
Yeah. But what radio station would they have played it on around here? Like in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, it would have had to have been LA or KLQ or something. I mean, but it's a hard rock album.
Yeah, but that's just it would have sounded right, and maybe they played it, but I think they were busy playing like Danzig and stuff like that. So
right, it wasn't going to get played on Sunny FM, and I don't know what GRD's lineup was like at the time, but
GRD was not yet, I don't think, that. But anyway, that doesn't matter. I definitely heard it later, long after I was into the Pumpkins.
Yeah, I mean, I remember listening to it in Josh Ippel's basement. He was big into the Pumpkins, and he was like, they've got this other album, Gish. This is during the Melancholy time, and like, oh, that's kind of cool, but I just want to listen to Melancholy. And then in preparation for this, I put them all in a big long playlist, and this was the first one up. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is actually a pretty good album. It's not as good as or as polished as Siamese Dream, and it's certainly not as thorough as Melancholy, but I enjoy it. I had a lot of fun listening to it and getting to know it over the last few months. Songs like Window Pane and Rhinoceros and Bury Me, I think really stood out. So yeah, what did you guys think of Gish?
So I think I actually bought this between Siamese Dream and Melancholy, and I listened to it and I was like, this is not. I just kind of like wrote it off as a first album that was no good, mm-hmm. and then I revisited it later. And I thought, okay, there's actually some good stuff there. Like that I Am One is pretty catchy. Rhinoceros is pretty catchy. But I always liked, sort of the second half, which was a little bit, from like, I think Crush to all the way to Daydream. Tristessa really, really, I thought was pretty good. And I think that may have actually been a single. But regardless, it didn't catch on with me when I first heard it. It took a while for me to go back and revisit it. It was sort of like, I don't like this. It's not the same as Siamese Dream. And then later on, when Melancholy came out, I kind of thought, well, this band has a lot of diversity, and maybe I wrote off that first album way too soon. And Turns out that was the case.
Yeah, there seemed to be a lot of this in the early 90s, where the band's second album, the Nevermind or the Super Unknown, those are the ones that caught on. And then you go back and you're like, oh, Bleach is kind of good, and Bad Motorfinger is pretty good. And it was the same thing for me with Gish. I was like, oh, that's this. I came back to it later.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, that's actually a pretty good album. It's not as good as the one that brought me to the band, but yeah. Had some good stuff to it. What did you think, Dan?
Yeah, I went and got it. First, I got Siamese Dream, and then I got Pisces Iscariot, like, the mostly B-sides from Siamese Dream, which is also great, but, not a real album, not an official album. And then I went and got Gish, and my reaction was kind of like Zach's. I was like, okay, I was really looking for more stuff like Siamese Dream, but this is okay. And it's kind of remained, like, it's grown on me a little bit over the years, because I think it's not like very as sophisticated, or maybe in the songwriting, like it feels like the songs aren't quite like finished. Almost like he has a lot of great ideas. Honestly, that's what Pisces Iscariot sounds like too. A lot of great ideas. The songs feel like they're mostly done, but they could have used a little more like savvy or experience to take them to that next level. But it sounds awesome. It's fun to listen to, and I think it's, you know, in the context of listening to a lot of other Pumpkin stuff recently, I'm like, you know, Gish is pretty darn good. You know, it has, there's enough of the juice that I like, because some of the, well, we'll get to them, but let's just say that it raised its ranking in my mind upon comparison to some of the later Corgan output.
Yeah. So then the aftermath of the Melancholy tour and the toll that took on the band, we've got the album Adore, which we didn't have Jimmy Chamberlin, right?
So what happened was he and Jonathan Melvoin, their touring keyboardist, were partaking in some heroin, and Jonathan Melvoin OD'd and died. And because of that, they fired Jimmy. He was out of the band, and then they had to try and regroup, and get a new drummer, and move on from there. So I think they finished up their tour, and there was not that many dates left, and then they had to try and figure out what they were going to do for the next album. And of course, you know, Billy being Billy is just like, well, we'll just program all the drums.
I don't need a drummer.
They did get some. Yeah, they did get some session drummers. I think Matt Walker and Joey Waronker, someone who played with Beck and maybe Alanis Morissette.
He played drums on there? But, interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
So then, Adore came out, and it was the follow-up to the biggest grunge alternative rock album ever, and just kind of, a lot of people bought it because, it's the Pumpkins, and there was so much confusion and so much hate.
Yeah.
And particularly, I loved it. I didn't have those same types of strong feelings that I think a lot of people, and probably maybe you guys had. But I think the songwriting is still there. I think Billy still did a really good job with the songwriting, and was able to construct a very interesting, very personal album. But it does not hit the same way as the earlier ones did.
What this album did was it proved, beyond a doubt, the value of a highly skilled drummer. Because, man, you go back and you listen to the stuff that Jimmy Chamberlin did on Melancholy and Siamese Dream, and it's really good drumming. And then the tracks where Billy puts in drum machines are terrible, and I hate them. Like, I don't want to listen to them. There's some stuff on the album where it's just acoustic stuff, with no drums, that is enjoyable, and you can see the songwriting ability. But man, this album, it's just it's missing that foundation that a good drummer provides. So I hated it. There's a couple songs that I thumbed up on it, but no, it was not a good one. What'd you think, Dan?
My initial reaction in 1997, or whenever the album came out, 98.
98, yep.
My initial reaction was, it was mixed in with, the knowledge that Jimmy Chamberlin wasn't there. Because I'm pretty sure I saw them twice on the Melancholy tour. First time with Jimmy Chamberlin, second time, I want to say Kenny Aronoff was playing drums for them.
Yep, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With his goofy little glasses.
Yeah. But which always makes you think of John Mellencamp, Kenny Aronoff. So I knew he wasn't in the band, and I was like, arguably, like, the second most important thing in the band, maybe you can say James Iha's crazy weirdo solos are really important too. But it seems like Dave said, it's a kind of a core supporting thing that makes the band great. So I walked into it kind of like, I don't know. And then I listened to like the songs that, the singles and like listened to the album like once, and I was like, nope, I'm going to, this sucks. I don't like it. I mean, not sucks exactly, but like, this is so much worse was my reaction. I had it in my head that it was I didn't think it was gonna be good, and then it wasn't good enough to sort of like convince me otherwise. And then I didn't really like go back to it till just recently. And in the context of all the Pumpkins that has been listened to, I would say yes. The songs are, I don't know what it is, like maybe it's just because it's more familiar to me, but I found it a little easier to latch on to these songs, and I thought this is decent. Like I didn't love it. I felt like I probably unfairly dismissed it then, and now I'm kind of like, yeah, tough time for the band, tough time for Billy. This is a pretty good product, really, overall, but it's hard to fall in love with. But compared to some, again, this is an ongoing theme. Billy's songwriting and his choices began to lose their potency for me around this time. And maybe that's me. Maybe that's not the writing. Maybe that's not him or the choices he makes. But this is the beginning of the sort of, this is fine. I can't complain about this, but I just can't really like latch onto it super strongly. It just doesn't really grab me that way.
So before the album came out, there was some sort of interview with Billy that they were asking him, how are you doing with the new album? What kind of struggles, or what's it going to be like with how your drummer, your core of the band? And he said, well, it's more acoustic driven. It's the best way he could describe it, I believe, was arcane night music, something along those lines. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that could be really interesting, because I thought back to the melancholy, like the songs that were just more acoustic, less drums or no drums, and very, they still had a charm, but were still kind of bleak in the writing. And I thought, oh, this could be really good. Like this could be sort of, no drums acoustic album. Best parts of the softer sides of melancholy. And then it came out and it's like, well, this is techno. This is an electronic album. But I still found merit in the songs and the constructions, and I put that sort of problematic side of it aside, and I still found value in it, and I still like listening to a lot of the songs even to this day. It's like perfect. It's sort of a continuation of 1979. It's like a sequel almost, and they even did that in the music video, I think, where they had a lot of the kids that were driving around in the car and partying in 1979 came back, and they're like dealing with the struggles of having kids and having kids as kids and doing your day job and stuff like that. But yeah, it doesn't have the same appeal as like Siamese Dream or Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, but I can still appreciate the songwriting and what Billy was trying to do with it. And especially like for Martha, oh man, that one is really, really personal for Billy, because his mom died around that time. And so he wrote that song specifically for his mom. And it's a very emotional song, and it's such a roller coaster of a song too, about how it starts off kind of simple, and then it just gets this like wall of cacophony of sounds and guitar things that just kind of drone on and on as it goes. And but yeah, I really like this album. I still like it, even though I can recognize that it's not as good as those earlier albums. And but I've always been partial to electronic music as well, so it wasn't like a huge shift for me to be like, oh well, now he's going into electronic techno. And so yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Adore.
All right. Up next is Machina, the Machine of the Gods. And so we lose Darcy on this one. We get the bassist from Hole.
I believe she recorded all the tracks.
Did she?
She just didn't go on tour.
Okay.
Yeah. So she is on it, but she departed as soon as it was recorded. And then again, you can also say, well, maybe not, because Billy does,
he re-records her parts most of the time anyway.
Yeah. If he doesn't like the way her parts sound, he'll just go in and re-record them. And I think that's a big part of why she left as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
He definitely did everything but the drums on and a couple of solos on Siamese Dream, much to the consternation of the other members. And I think it's just an ongoing habit. He's just a control freak, and like
perfectionist control freak.
Is his version of the bass lines, like the honestly rather simple, bass lines that the Pumpkins usually use. Is his version like noticeably better than Darcy's? No, I think he just needed to feel more control and sort of establish that authority. But anyway, yeah, that's Billy. You sort of have to live with the Billy.
Yeah. So Everlasting Gaze is a great return to their big sound. It's got the pounding drums and the big guitars and all that stuff. And then for me, the rest of the album just kind of falls flat, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, the album leaked about 3 months early, and so I was able to download it. Wink.
Legally download it.
And I burned a copy of it, and I gave it to this guy that was really into the Pumpkins at Target, working at Target, and he listened to it, and he's like, yeah, it's still got that techno sheen. I don't like it. and I think that's an appropriate way to describe it. And like this one's actually even a little bit weaker than Adore for me.
Yeah.
I do like some things. I really like the sort of progginess of the Glass and the Ghost Children, how it's like this 10-minute, starts out one way and then kind of like has a weird talking to a therapist thing in the middle, and then in a sort of an acoustic outro droney type of thing at the end. And like the Crying Tree of Mercury, that's one I love. That's a favorite deep cut of mine. But yeah, like the singles, Stand Inside Your Love, I think Try. They're okay. It's just it's kind of missing something. It has some good moments, but it's not all the way there. And I think Billy was trying to do this like what do you call it? This big epic story driven concept album thing, and it just doesn't work. It's it is what it is.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know, it's not that interesting. I wound up after going through it a few times, I just wound up skipping through the songs because it didn't seem to bring anything new.
When I heard about this album coming out and Jimmy Chamberlain coming back, I really wanted to like this. I was excited. I was like, yes, we're going to get the next great Pumpkins album now. And the singles are fine. A little underwhelming, but fine. I just remember trying to like this for a while and then just giving up and being like, meh, I don't know. It just disappointed me so much. I don't know, like maybe just I don't know. I just the problem is it came after Adore, so I was kind of like checked out a little bit already on them.
Right, you're already soured on the Pumpkins,
and maybe it's just it was my attitude towards it that colored it. But I think that the songs aren't. I don't know. Like there's something about it. Maybe like the guy said, there's a sheen on it that just, and I think this is an ongoing, another problem. I might as well say it now because it would be the next album. But my fourth favorite Pumpkins album is probably the Swan album. Unfortunately, that's kind of the last time I feel like Billy had the sort of magic. He's a good writer. All the stuff that comes after is to varying degrees worthwhile. I'm not trying to dismiss it, and I don't know exactly why, but like the sound, the composition, the production, all the different things. Just it's almost like maybe it's because he has such a weird voice and how he has so many different like approaches to how he uses his voice, and I just feel like Zwan is the last time that I was really like, I really like this, even though it's not to me on par with the best Pumpkin stuff. This sounds like the Pumpkins. It looks like the Pumpkins. I don't know. It just doesn't quite do it for me. It's missing something, and I don't know what it is. But yeah, I found it. I was very sad when I did not like this album because I was like, oh, that's kind of the end, isn't it? No more.
It should have been the return that we all deserved.
Yeah, it should have been. I don't know. It just didn't quite hit the mark for me, and I was very, very sad about that.
And along with the techno electronic flavorings, if you will, interspersed on this album, I think it's also like overproduced. I think they spent too much time trying to get dial in the exact sound that they wanted for every single song, and I think that was what made some of those earlier albums so good. Is that it's like you just lay down the tracks. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's the core of the song is the songwriting and the lyrical motifs and things, and then when you put it, commit it to tape or digital or whatever, you don't have to meticulously go over every little thing, every little detail to make it exact. Right. And I think that's what this feels like, robotic. It feels like it's so perfect. It's missing that emotional charm that those earlier albums had.
Yeah. So I believe Zeitgeist is the next one.
Yeah. So, well, let's do a little bit of history here. So after this album came out, they quit the band. They broke up. Smashing Pumpkins died. I can't remember the exact date. It was sometime in 2000, but they played a final concert at I think the Metro in Chicago. And it was like multiple night or multiple. Yeah. It was like 4 hours for the for the last concert.
Yeah, it was like a goodbye show. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. And they gave it up and they said, we're done here. It's over. And then they went their separate ways. And then Billy did the whole Zwan thing, which we're not talking about here. But then they eventually got back together. And
Billy had some solo stuff in there too, didn't he?
He did his solo album. Yep. The Future Embrace, which was full on techno. That was like, it's just me. It's doing all the things. And so then it was full on electronic techno. And then I think it was around 2006 that they started, making announcements that getting the band back together, everybody's coming back except for Eha and Darcy.
And the thing is, everyone except for 2/3 of them. So
exactly.
And the way he announced this was like a full page ad in like one of the big Chicago newspapers.
Yeah.
But before it had all been even settled, I think the ad was basically like, I want my band back. We're coming back. And then after that, it was, all right,
we're doing this.
Yeah. And it was like, again, it's all about Billy. And then it was, let's see if we want to get the other people back involved. And, Jimmy's usually up for it. So he came back. But that's because he does a thing that Billy Corgan can't do. Everybody else does something that Billy Corgan can do. That's the only reason that Jimmy, I think, is always around. I mean, he's a fantastic drummer. I love Jimmy Chamberlin, but I think in Billy's mind,
absolutely,
if he wants live drums, the best way to do it is to get Jimmy Chamberlin because he can't do it himself.
Yep.
So I didn't even listen to Zeitgeist because it wasn't available on the YouTube Music. But you guys, I believe, have both listened to it. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts?
Are you saying you've never actually listened to this album?
Not on purpose, or not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, when it came out, there was a skosh of excitement, so Smashing Pumpkins will always be sort of like a favorite band for me, because of what they did in the olden days, in my formative years. And so it really doesn't matter whether, what they're putting out, I'm going to listen to it one way or another. Maybe not right away, maybe, it'll happen. And so, but when this one came back, because there was so much time that had passed, and because, it was just Billy and Jimmy, I was thinking, well, let's give it a try. Let's see what it is. Maybe it's not going to be the same techno-y thing, or maybe it is, and it's going to be boring and I don't care. But it's definitely not techno-y. This is a very harsh, and in some ways kind of underproduced or produced in the wrong ways, album. That's actually notorious for that. But it's got, it had 3 singles. I think the first one was Tarantula, which is sort of like a kind of in your face, metal-ish type song. Then there was, I think, Doomsday Clock, or That's the Way My Love Is. So it's very, very heavy metal-ish, or hard rock-ish. It loses, I think, a lot of the alternative stylings. I liked parts of it. I did not like the whole thing. I didn't feel like it was like a cohesive grouping of songs. It all, the sound is cohesive, but the songwriting is all over the place. What are your thoughts, Dan?
I like this album more than I think it deserves. I remember we were listening, we were both in, I think in Tucson at the time. And I remember Tarantula came. And we went and saw them.
Yes.
And
they were doing Fall Ball at the local stadium.
Yeah, I think Cypress Hill and Paramore are the bands that I remember were there. We went out. We saw them. There was rain. Billy got pissy because people were like, being dicks, because, it's a crowd of rock fans, so they're being dicks.
And they're all drunk.
Yeah. So he came out.
He left and came back.
They stopped playing because it was raining and they didn't want to get electrocuted. And then he came back and was like, "We're gonna play. Just shut." He got all mad, and then he came back and played, and it was fine. We didn't get a super long show, but whatever. But I remember Tarantula, I think, was the first single. It's hard for me to tell because then when we heard Doomsday Clock, we were like, "Is this the same song?" It's the same song, right? Like, it's so similar. And I like That's the Way My Love Is. It's a nice sort of like mid-tempo, like single sounding thing. And I sort of enjoy the over the topness of like the United States, and like the sort of like some of the Jimmy Chamberlain showcase stuff where he gets to like, really do like a lot of like, strong rhythmic stuff. Kind of like Pomp and Circumstances. This album, it is weirdly produced, but it leans more into like the metal heavy side, which honestly, I think maybe this is why I like it more than you do it from the sounds of things. Because I think you enjoy the techno-y stuff more. It leads into that side, and therefore I can sort of forgive it some of its, it sounds like there's not enough variety. There wasn't enough sort of like super high quality songs, but I kind of like it. Like of the albums that came from this stage forward, it's a real outlier by the way it sounds, but maybe that's why I think I don't think it's the best album, but it's the one I would be more likely to spend time listening to. It made more of an impact, even if it was a sort of like, well, this isn't great, but I don't know. For some reason, I have a little bit of affection for this one, but not a ton because it's not great. And it is tonally sort of too similar and not very sophisticated. It's just sort of like bludgeoning the whole album. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, it feels very over compressed. Like they just compressed the snot out of everything, probably because this was at the height of the loudness wars where everybody was trying to sound the loudest on the radio when they got their single on the radio.
Yep.
But yeah, for me, it's just okay. It's not very good. It's not terrible. But it's not something that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go back and listen to Zeitgeist again.
Yeah,
you know?
I think,
and of course you can't because it's not available anywhere.
Yeah, I think okay is the right term for it. I just have a little affection for it, mostly because it leans into more of like the guitar side, and it really focuses on the guitar and drums, and that's honestly my favorite stuff about the Pumpkins. Jimmy's voice. Or Billy's voice can sometimes be a huge like addition to the song, and sometimes it depends how he uses it. It's never bad. I wouldn't blame someone for being like, Billy Corgan's a terrible singer. I'm like, well, I mean, you're not wrong. And if someone's like, oh, he's super annoying, I'm like, well, I should be annoyed, but I never am. But sometimes I don't. It's not consistently a plus for me. Whereas whenever they're like leaning into their guitars and leaning into the drums, I'm always in. So I recognize it's not a very good album, but I kind of like it anyway. That's kind of how I feel about it.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think one of the biggest complaints is that the mixing of Zeitgeist is that his vocals are lower in the mix than usual, and so people complain that they can't really hear him singing the same way, present. It's just kind of like there, but not really there. I never got that. I don't really know why people think that, but that is a common complaint about the album. So maybe that explains why you like this one a little bit more.
I don't dislike Billy Corgan's vocals. I rationally, I feel like I should dislike them, but I actually often it's one of the best parts of the song. But then some songs I'm like, well, the vocals are here and that's fine. And on this album, I don't think the vocals are hugely useful. But I love that. I love that it felt like an actual, like full on Jimmy Chamberlin return. And that's always good in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. So 5 years later, they record another album, Oceana.
Yeah.
And my thoughts on this one are, why?
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing that stood out at all. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't good in any way. I just, like, this is in the period where there was no new music for me, that 10-year period where I didn't hear anything new for some reason, along with Zeitgeist. And I just, going and listening to it now, I just kind of don't know why it needed to come out, because it was boring.
Yeah, definitely. Very boring. I've listened to it numerous times and I cannot recall a single song or melody or vocal line or lyric that stands out or I care about or anything. And that's really sad to me, because, even in these other albums that we're talking about, Machina, Adore, there are emotional moments that I connected with, and there's just nothing here. It's vacant. It has nothing that I care about or want to be involved in at all.
Yeah.
What'd you think, Dan?
It's interesting you both said that. I thought, wow, I'm having trouble concentrating on this particular round of Ride or Die, because I know, to be fair, I have it on in the background while I'm doing something else, not just driving necessarily. In fact, rarely driving. I'm usually like, like writing posts or like taking care of stuff, whatever. And so like I am slightly distracted. So I'm like, man, I really need to figure out, I need to put like I need to like get like an aux in or like a Bluetooth radio for my car so I can like stream this while I'm driving, because then you're less distracted, because driving is sort of autopilot, whereas some of these other things you have to engage your brain more. But I was like, man, I know I've been through all these albums. Like what I'm talking about is starting with Oceana, because it's the one it's the first one where I was truly unfamiliar. I don't know if I ever even heard. I think I listened to the first song or two when it came out, but by this point in 2012, I was kind of like mentally like that. The Pumpkins will never put out anything good again, And I was like, man, I'm listening to it. And then it runs through and it loops back and I start over again. And I'm really trying to concentrate on these new albums. And I'm like, man, these songs all kind of run together. And I think one of the problems for me is that Billy Corgan, I'm talking about his singing again here, I guess. He like the vocal tone and like the vocal range that he sings in starts to be really samey. And that might work fine like on a single, or if you're just listening to a few songs, or if it's mixed in like in a big shuffle of all of his songs. But they don't like burrow into your brain very well. It all kind of sounds the same. No. And I was disappointed.
I'm literally zoning out while you're talking about this. That's how boring this album is. Yeah. I'm seeing on Wikipedia here, it says Spin gave a rating of 7 out of 10, declaring that it is easily Corgan's best work since his Rat in the Cage heyday. What?
No.
Are you serious?
I think Zeitgeist at least is like sonically like in your face, whereas this sort of
and it's got some really cool
background.
Like dub. Zeitgeist has some doubled solos and stuff.
I'm going to move this discussion along too, because honestly, I'm looking at Monuments to an Elegy.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for me. This one also is like, I think there's 22 tracks between the two albums. And by the time I'd been through the albums, 3 or 4 times, it would take me about 5 minutes to listen to these two albums, because I would just skip the songs. They'd go for 30 seconds and I'd go to the next one, and go for 30 seconds and I'd go to the next one. Because they're boring.
For Monuments to an Elegy, I mostly agree. There are a couple tracks. I think the 3 near the end, Drum and Fife, Monuments, and Dorian, that are not like total trash, total garbage. I in listening to those, I can remember those, or they they come back to me from time to time. But certainly they just don't stand out in the same way that like other like 1979, 33, those kind of songs do. So yeah, Monuments. I wouldn't say Monuments is exactly the same as Oceania for me, but it's very, very close. It's not good.
Yeah, I like this one a little bit more, and I think the reason I liked it a little bit more is because I less frequently looked at the playlist and said, "Are we still on this album?" Because it's 9 songs, shorter. and it's like a Weezer album. It's like 9 songs and 30 minutes, and so it gets in and gets out. I think there was a little more variety, but if you mixed up all 22 songs here, I don't know that I could tell you which song was from which album, even a little bit.
Nope.
But yeah, I think this benefits from brevity. But it's very similar for me. Just forgettable.
Yeah. All right. Shiny and Oh So Bright, Volume 1, LP, No Past, No Future, No Sun. What?
Yeah.
I mean, do we really need to talk any more about that?
So I liked Knights of Malta. I thought that was kind of an interesting songwriting endeavor. And that's it. There's really nothing else here that I think there were like 3 singles. Solera, Silvery Sometimes. Yeah.
2 according to
Knights of Malta.
Oh yeah, 3 according to Wikipedia.
Yeah. But it's still the same. So James Eha is back. For
this is the first one where everyone but Darcy
Jimmy Chamberlain is back.
Yep, everyone.
So
we
didn't comment. I think on those last 2 albums that I think Jimmy had gone.
Jimmy quit. Yeah. Jimmy
was gone again.
Jody got married. Yep, exactly. And so the thing that's interesting is there's no Darcy, but there is Jeff Schroeder who hopped on board when Billy decided to reform the band before Zeitgeist. He's the only holdover from that era, and he's been on every album since 2007. So it's him and then the original band. And I think they just either have a touring bassist or they just have somebody play bass, when they're recording, because bass isn't important, as everybody knows. I will say bassists are the most easily replaced, but they're hard to find because nobody wants to play bass instead of guitar. I would say this album had a little more sonic variety than the other ones, but I had trouble finding songs that I actually liked. So I think, and I think it was just dashed off real quick. Like, I don't think it was a sit down and write it carefully type album. And so I thought, that's the other thing too. There, even with Jimmy Chamberlin back, there is a little bit of they still have that sheen of techno-y synthiness, really more in the drums. I don't know. It just I feel like this was maybe a little more interesting than the last two. Also, it's short, which is, I'm starting to like that about Pumpkins albums, which is not good. You shouldn't want less. But also short, a little more variety.
You're in for a treat with the next one.
Yes, yes, a little more variety, but I don't really care about any of these songs, and I just didn't really like this one very much.
Yeah. So, how do you say this last one, Zach? Sear.
That's how I guessed it was. What it was called anyway. I don't know. It could be wrong.
This is. It's super techno or synth pop or electro pop or
synth
whatever you want to call it.
I think of it as synth pop.
Yep. They say that Jimmy Chamberlin played on this album. I don't hear it.
I don't hear it either.
I don't know how that's possible.
There's not a whole lot of Chamberlin-isms in it. It's if he's playing, he's simulating.
This could
drum
very
machines.
well have just been Corgan sitting in his studio in his basement or in Avril Lavigne's garage or wherever.
Yeah.
And doing whatever he needs to do and putting other people's names on it, hoping that it'll help make sales or get attention. I don't know. But yeah, I really wanted, I remember we're in the depths of the pandemic here, right, in 2020. And Zach, you messaged me, there's a new Pumpkins album coming. I'm like, oh, let's see. Maybe this is the light that we need, in times of trouble. But gosh, it's just more synth pop. It's hard for me to get excited about this.
So I'm going to probably be the divergent voice here, but I actually really love this album.
Do you? And that's awesome.
It's not perfect. It definitely suffers from too many songs. There's probably at least like 5 or 6 songs that could have easily been cut.
Yeah.
But I think the ones that really shine are really good. It's really good songwriting. I think it's Billy sort of returning to his form and trying to collect a group of songs that work together and have a cohesiveness, and I can really appreciate that. For me, it wasn't the return to the Smashing Pumpkins of my youth, but it was a return to the Smashing Pumpkins that had been lost on the last 3 albums, and so I really appreciate that, and I still like it, and I've listened to it numerous times, over and over several times, but there are certain songs that pop out more than others, but I like what he was trying to do, and I definitely, like I said, I don't think Jimmy actually played on this album, even though he gets credit, and I think that's really weird because some of these songs could have been like more interesting with some Jimmy flourishes and fills and things like that. But Dan, what's your take on it?
This sounds to me like a Billy Corgan solo album. It sounds like a pretty good Billy Corgan solo album, but as we both mentioned, 20 songs is stupid. I don't think you need 23 and a half 4-minute songs on an album. If you want to have 72 minutes, have some long ones by all means. 20 songs is dumb. Also, I did a little reading after I'd listened to this, and Billy Corgan, God, he's such a he's such an ass. So somebody asked him about what would the synth pop sound, and I'm going to read the quote here. Let me look it up. Bill Corgan noted, "I got sick of making music that people kept telling me didn't sound contemporary. In my mind, I'm a contemporary band. I'm a contemporary artist." And then he goes on to say other stuff. But basically, it's like he got pissy and then decided on a theme for the album. And his theme is, I'm going to make it contemporary by choosing a not, it's more in vogue in the last year or two, the synth pop thing. But like, it's like he was choosing from a selection of synth sounds that aren't very interesting and are all kind of samey sounding. And they sound a little bit like starter Cure synth to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
yep.
It's this, and it's the lack of tonal variety. Zach, I just never got past the point of like being sort of mildly annoyed by the sameness to get underneath there and really appreciate the songs. You might be right, given more time, but I spent
the first few listens were it was kind of like everything's kind of blending together, but then after I don't know, like fifth or sixth listen, certain tracks started to really sort of kind of come out and do more. Whether it was there was sort of a catchiness that I started to latch onto, or different lyrical motifs that kind of I liked, but yeah, no, I could definitely see that, because it does feel like 20 of the same track on the first listen, definitely the first few listens. But I think, like if you really give it more of a chance, there's something there, but you have to kind of like, for me, I liked Adore and Machina more than you guys. So this is not a huge stretch. But I think for you guys, it's not really going to do much, even if you gave it more of a chance, because the underlying parts of the songs are just not what you really care about. And that's fine, but I think to speak to like, Billy's arrogance and stuff, I think his problem is he's gone away from doing what he should do because he's an artist, because he has these things that need to come out he wants to make people happy, or he wants to try and produce something that he thinks people will like. And that's a problem. For an artist, you need to be true to yourself and true to your art.
Yeah, and this is maybe a little teaser preview for a likely soon to be coming Ride or Die. But you can compare this to what Radiohead started doing after they became insanely popular with OK Computer, and they did weird stuff. They did stuff that a lot of people didn't like. They alienated some people, but you always got the sense they were pursuing what they were interested in, and what they wanted to do. And some people, Dave, you may or may not like. I know you haven't spent much time with some of these later stuff. There's some stuff in there that I don't like, but I always felt like I could understand from being in bands that you can't just keep playing the same songs, the same style, make the same album. You can't. I mean, AC/DC can, but like most people get tired of just the same thing and just diminishing returns. I always get the impression that Radiohead was like, we got to keep ourselves interested in this if we're doing it as our profession. I'm excited about this. Let's just go for it. With Billy, it always feels like he's being defensive or pissy, or like trying to prove a point when he makes these decisions, which is fine. He has the right to, and to be fair, he hasn't just sat in there and played like recycled, like Pumpkins riffs from like the late 90s. Like he's done other stuff. He's done a bunch of different stuff, but it all feels sort of like, Zeitgeist feels like, I'm going to give people what they want. It's all the rock. And then other times it's like he's trying to, like with this one, he's trying to fit into a contemporary sound. And it's like, okay, that's fine. You have the right to do whatever you want with that. But I have the right to be like, this is boring and I'm not that interested. Maybe a few more listens and I would have got to that level you're talking about, Zach, with this album. But like I concentrated most of my time on these, listening to the albums I didn't know, which is the last 3 or 4, starting with the last one I really spent time with on my own was Zeitgeist. So Elegy, Oceania, Shiny, Oh So Bright, and Seer. I spent most of my time listening to them, and I'm not saying that they sound exactly alike, but I had real trouble like determining when albums changed from one album to the next. I had real trouble distinguishing songs within the albums. I kept listening to them, and I was just like, whatever it is that gets me into the Pumpkins is not there. I can still be like, oh, this is a nice melody, or this is good production, but it's hard for me to love any of these songs. I just cannot get there. And
so Dan, would you then say, would you say you're ride or die?
No, I am definitively not ride or die. So if you asked me what do I need first and foremost, I could live with just Siamese Dream and Melancholy. That's all I really need. I definitely would want Gish, Pisces Iscariot, and honestly, that's all I really need, and kind of want. I can find things to like about a couple other albums, but
I'm in the same place as you.
That's all I need.
Smashing Pumpkins for me is Siamese Dream and Melancholy. I'll take Gish along if there's room. Adores, whatever. But the rest I don't need. I'm definitely not ride or die. How about you, Zach?
I would say, I am ride or die. Because like I said earlier, it really doesn't matter what's coming out. If it's a Smashing Pumpkins album, I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to give it a fair shot. And so I'd say I am ride or die. But I would also say this, that one of the lyrics that stands out the most for me is from 33, where the opening line where he says, "Speak to me in a language that I can hear." And I think that is the most appropriate lyric, because in those days, in Siamese Dream, Melancholy, maybe even a little bit of Gish or Adore, he was speaking in a language we could hear.
Exactly.
And then from then on, he lost it. The language changed, whether he grew in different ways and diverged or whatever. But his artistic output changed to the point where we don't speak the same language. Like the things he's talking about don't mean the same things to us. And so I think that's where it kind of, it's lost me along the way. But man, am I looking forward to whatever this Melancholy sequel album is that's coming out, that he's working on. I know it's not going to be good, but I am going to listen to the shit out of that thing.
I caught it on audio